Wednesday, March 31st, with John Chancellor reporting from the NBC News Center in New York and David Brinkley's Journal from Washington.
Good evening. The 400,000 members of the Teamsters Union hold the immediate future of the United States economy in their hands this evening. They go on strike at midnight if they don't get a new contract, and that could disrupt the economy. They're talking about a contract with the truckers and the Secretary of Labor in a motel in a Chicago suburb. The Teamsters president, Frank Fitzsimmons, is there, and he's under a lot of pressure. Brian Ross is covering the story.
Negotiations continued all day in this motel. The talks are being held behind closed doors, and nobody on the outside knows whether any progress was made. But Teamster officials are under pressure from the membership to get all they can, and union officials have the rank and file's authorization to call a strike at midnight tonight. Teamster President Frank Fitzsimmons took time out from the negotiations last week to accept the National Love Award from a Teamster-supported charity. In the audience honoring Fitzsimmons were trucking industry executives, other union officials, and some people authorities say are organized crime figures. Teamster officials have long been associated with such people, but this year Fitzsimmons is being criticized from within his own union for answering to the companies and criminals and ignoring the union's rank and file. Once more, members of the Teamsters Union have organized dissident groups, and they may have had an effect on the current Teamster negotiation. Teamsters for a Decent Contract is the name of one group, with small but well-organized chapters in important trucking cities like Cleveland, Chicago, Pittsburgh, and Detroit. The group was formed at about the same time the contract talks started, and the dissidents accused Fitzsimmons of selling out in the negotiation. In the past, Teamster Union members have been afraid to oppose their leadership, but that is changing. Criticism of union corruption, Fitzsimmons, and his handling of the negotiations is not hard to find at truck stops.
Fitzsimmons has done nothing. He's just up there standing in front like a puppet, that's all.
I wouldn't trust him from here to that car. That's what I think of Fitzsimmons.
Trucking industry negotiators fear the rank-and-file opposition may force Fitzsimmons to stick to his tough demands and call a nationwide trucking strike, if only to dispel the notion he is selling out. And even if a new contract is reached by tonight, ending the threat of an authorized strike, the dissident Teamsters are talking of staging wildcat strikes to show their mistrust of their own union officials. Brian Ross, NBC News, Detroit.
In San Francisco tonight, there is a strike, a paralyzing strike of about 2,000 city workers. They've been pretty much able to shut down the city because nobody will cross their picket lines. Rick Davis has that story.
There were no sounds of cable car bells coming up the hills of San Francisco today. There were no cars on the tracks. They are in the cable car barn behind a line of pickets. And the buses aren't moving either, stopped by the same citywide strike. On an average day, 500,000 fares are paid on the buses, trolleys, and cable cars. The drivers aren't on strike, but they are refusing to cross the picket lines of other municipal workers. The result is easily seen. Traffic usually moves fast along this street. Today, there was more frustration than movement. It was jammed with cars. Only 10% of the city workers are actually on strike, but 20,000 others are honoring their lines. They are responding to a taxpayers' revolt in the last election. Voters rejected a pay raise for many of the blue-collar workers employed by the city. Instead of getting a raise this year, the workers are getting a pay cut. Here's one example. City carpenters expected to make $21,800. Instead, they're taking a pay cut to $17,200. The situation kept getting worse throughout the day. By noon, pickets were at the docks on the waterfront. Teamsters and longshoremen refused to cross the lines, and that closed the port of San Francisco. Rick Davis, NBC News, San Francisco.
Also on the program tonight, the New Jersey Supreme Court handed down a ruling favoring the parents of Karen Ann Quinlan comatose for a year. The parents want her to die. We'll have more details on the new Russian proposals just received on a treaty to limit nuclear weapons. And our nightly news special this evening deals with the birth tonight of a new railroad system in the United States called Conrail, which is built on the bones of a lot of railroads which died. Those stories and others in a minute.
A big dog, a little boy, and an oily telephone pole can really mess up a new jacket.
Mrs. Janet String wrote this letter to tell us about it.
Tommy was miserable. He had just been awarded at that football jacket. Thank goodness Spray and Wash removed that oily mess, because a special jacket like this could never be replaced.
Not only tough stains, but everyday stains can ruin clothes, too, you know. So use Spray and Wash. Get rid of the stains instead of the clothes.
What makes America work? An abundance of food and ways to preserve it.
A lot of our food is packaged in cans. Billions of cans a year. It takes steel to make those cans, and we supply more of it than anyone else. By improving our steel-making technology, we've helped can makers develop a new and even better food package, the seamless can.
Helping preserve our food, that makes America work. At United States Steel, we're involved.
It was disclosed today in Washington that the Russians have submitted their latest proposals on a new SALT agreement on limiting nuclear weapons. The two sides, from what we have learned, still have serious differences, but there are some new Soviet positions. Two new weapon systems are involved. Our cruise missile, which can be guided at low levels to targets with great accuracy. And the Russian bomber called Backfire. The Russians say there is no threat to us from the Backfire bomber, but we're not so sure. Marilyn Berger has some information on the new Soviet position.
The Russians continue to insist that the Backfire bomber not be counted as a strategic weapon in any SALT agreement. NBC News has learned that the Russians have taken the unusual step of providing President Ford with highly classified information to support their argument that the bomber is not strategic. Moscow now appears prepared to let the United States have air-launched cruise missiles. But they want a total ban on cruise missiles launched from submarines. That Soviet position is very difficult for the Ford administration to accept. After arguing for months that the Backfire should be counted as a strategic bomber, the administration would have a tremendous problem presenting any treaty to Congress that does not put some controls on the plane. That's particularly true while Mr. Ford's defense policy is under attack by Ronald Reagan. So the prospects for SALT appear to be very dim. But the administration says the Soviet response is worth studying, apparently hoping to keep the negotiations alive. Marilyn Berger, NBC News, Washington.
Officials in Washington today confirmed the story Marilyn Berger reported exclusively last night, that the United States and the Soviet Union are closer than ever before on an agreement for on-site inspection of sites where peaceful nuclear explosions have taken place. If that comes true, it would be the first time that the Russians have agreed to let Americans make inspections on Soviet soil. It is quiet tonight in Beirut, Lebanon. Our bureau there says all you can hear is an occasional artillery shell and a lot of talk about another ceasefire. But there was some heavy fighting earlier today as the leftist Muslims, who are winning, sought to gain more territory in case there is a ceasefire. One of the places which the leftists want is a town called Kahale, which sits on the road to Damascus. Don Craig, one of our correspondents, was on the Damascus road today. Here is his report.
Left-wing Muslim forces shelled the village from this stronghold just across the valley. This morning's ground assault on Kahale drove the right-wing Christian phalanges back to the outskirts of the village. Artillery and machine gun fire continued to echo across the valley as the rightists began a counterattack. The leftists have been fighting in the mountains surrounding Beirut on two major fronts. Their movement northeast of the Lebanese capital has been stopped. In fact, they've had to give up ground. Under increasing pressure for a ceasefire, the leftists abandoned hope of a victory in the northeast, and now they're getting all the men and guns they can to this village of Kahale. The town is important militarily because it controls the Damascus highway, Beirut's link with the east. Time is running out for the leftists. They want very much to win here. The right-wing phalangists are just as determined not to let them have that victory. Don Craig, NBC News, outside Kahale.
It turned out today that the robbery of a Brinks armored truck in Montreal yesterday was the biggest cash robbery in the company's history. 5 bandits operating with military precision hijacked the Brinks truck and took from it $2,800,000 in cash, most of it in unmarked bills of small denomination.
Here I am I'm father of the bride, and I have trouble tying my tie just because my arthritis kicked up.
Here, let me help you. I'll do your tie, Jim. You take your Anacin.
When even simple movement can cause pain, Anacin, with the pain reliever most recommended by doctors for arthritis, brings more freedom of movement without pain, relieves minor pain and its stiffness for hours.
You sure act like that Anacin worked.
It worked fine.
Anacin.
£100 can of dog food. It's what you get when you feed your dog canned Vets. Thank you, George. Good tasting Vets has 100% complete and balanced nutrition, but costs up to 50% less than higher priced brands. That's like getting about 200 pounds of nutritious, good tasting Vets dog food a year. Over 200 cans free, just for feeding your dog Vets. Vets. Complete nutrition, economically priced.
Ronald Reagan goes on nationwide television tonight on NBC to attack President Ford's foreign and domestic policies. Reagan's paid political speech is already on videotape. In it, he says that the country is in danger because of the Ford foreign policy, and he says that danger is growing. Reagan also disputes Mr. Ford's claims of a solid economic recovery. On the Democratic side, Senator Henry Jackson campaigned another day in New York for next Tuesday's primary. For Jackson, New York is the big one. Bob Jamieson reports.
One day this week, Henry Jackson went to the top of New York's World Trade Center and looked down on the city and the state as though he had already won the April 6th primary. Jackson expects to win here, and he must, because he has told everyone he will, and because of Jimmy Carter's string of victories. Jackson is aiming his campaign at groups favoring him, like organized labor, and New York's ethnic groups, particularly Jews, criticizing détente, an issue he believes is significant among all voters, no matter their religion or ties to other countries.
If there's nothing wrong with the concept of détente, but what is wrong is the idea that they can, the Soviet Union, run it the way they want.
And much of Jackson's rhetoric here is devoted to his early support of New York in its financial crisis.
I was the first one to come out for help to New York City when the other politicians said it was unpopular and they wouldn't have anything to do with it. I took the lead.
At the same time, he tells people Jimmy Carter opposed help for New York City. Carter's string of victories caused Jackson to adjust his New York strategy. He's spending more time upstate than he originally planned because there is a feeling Carter may be gaining on him there. Jackson has increased the tempo of his attacks on Carter, saying he is already a poor loser before the primary.
I think what's happened to Jimmy Carter is that history will record that in New York State he lost his smile.
At the same time he is doing all of this, Jackson is trying to make a respectable showing in Wisconsin, while spending only 2.5 days in that state and little money. But he boasts strong labor support that generated this rally last night. He is counting on labor to carry his Wisconsin campaign. He makes no claims of victory. Jackson at one time was predicting a landslide victory in New York. Now he says he will win a majority, thus acknowledging Carter's growing strength and the danger of setting a target he might miss. Bob Jamieson, NBC News, New York.
Jimmy Carter replied today to reports of a Stop Carter movement in Wisconsin. The New York Times reported this morning that Hubert Humphrey is quietly supporting Morris Udall in next Tuesday's Wisconsin primary to keep Carter from running off with a Democratic presidential nomination. Carter says he doesn't know if that story is true, but he said the American people, in his words, don't like that kind of maneuvering, and moves like that, he said, might cost the Democrats the election. Udall says he understands that it's in Humphrey's interest to support him now, to give Humphrey a chance to win the nomination at the convention. But Udall says he is nobody's stand-in, that he's out to win and expects to win himself. The Secretary of Commerce, Elliot Richardson, got an additional job today. President Ford named Richardson to head a 10-member task force. The task force will investigate overseas payoffs by American corporations, and it will recommend what, if anything, can and should be done about these payoffs. David Brinkley's Journal tonight is about the job the commission has before it. David?
It is not clear the new federal task force can do anything about business paying bribes in foreign countries, and if not, it is merely another piece of window dressing. American firms selling abroad often have to pay off to get foreign business because the buyers demand it, take it as customary, see nothing wrong with it, and because foreign competitors are more than willing to pay. But when the firm has to report back to Washington on its expenses, profits, and so on, then the complications begin. If a payoff is held to be illegal, Internal Revenue will not allow it as a business deduction, but of course, if any profits result, then it is eager to tax them. And business is encouraged to sell abroad, to make jobs here, and to help the balance of payments. But if it has to pay off to make a sale, the Washington bureaucracies are then eager to pass moral judgments. The British, by contrast, take it for granted that to get export business, they often have to pay off. And the exporting company simply notes it as a custom of the country, and nothing more is said about it. And they do not try to force their ethical standards on other countries. And, of course, bribery and extortion are not unknown in this country. Numerous big city hotels, for example, won't buy a pint of mayonnaise until somebody in the kitchen is paid. President Ford's task force will find that in foreign trade, its choices are limited to accepting the payoffs or giving up the exports, one or the other. John?
Howard Bo Calloway, President Ford's former campaign manager, was cleared of one charge today. The Civil Aeronautics Board ruled that Calloway did not act illegally when he talked agency officials into allowing charter flights to land near a ski resort in which he has an interest. But the agency did call Calloway's actions regrettable. They were taken while he was Army Secretary. Other potential conflict of interest charges against Calloway are still under scrutiny at the Justice Department.
What does it take to start the wheels of American industry rolling? It takes machines, men, and money. That's where savings and loans come in. Money you save with us goes back into your community in the form of home loans. The savings and loan commitment to housing generates over $100 million a day for jobs, goods, and services. Help keep America rolling by having your savings account at your savings and loan.
Here's Johnson's new 200-horsepower V6, world's most powerful outboard, bringing new performance to bigger boats and leading the line to put everybody into this world of family fun, dependably, economically. Your Johnson dealer has 15 horsepower choices, from the powerful 200 to the little 2. The world runs more Johnsons than any other outboard.
This evening's Nightly News special is about a huge new American railroad. It will come into existence at midnight. It's going to be called Conrail. Conrail combines 7 bankrupt railroads in the Northeast and the Middle West. Its purpose is to keep railroad freight service alive, just as the purpose of Amtrak is to keep passenger service going. The success of Conrail is crucial to the future of the country's railroad freight service. It is also important to the taxpayers, since Conrail begins its life with government money. Robert Hager reports.
Penn Central's daily TH3A freight headed up Crescent Mountain out of Altoona, Pennsylvania. 88 cars long, but 55 are deadheading, empty. For years, Penn Central and other lines in the Northeast and Midwest have been losing money. Tonight, Conrail takes over. Then it will be the government or the taxpayers who will risk the losses. The Conrail system is not supposed to be a government railroad. Conrail calls itself a private enterprise. But the government put Conrail in business with over $2 billion of government money. And more will be needed if Conrail doesn't make a profit. The bankrupt railroads have been below the profit line since 1968. Last year, they lost about $370 million. Conrail claims it can turn this around, break even within 3 years, and make $1 billion a year by 1985. That will be difficult. The railroads are in terrible shape. Tracks and roadbeds are bad.
It makes you run at lower speeds,
where you could be doing normal speed. Passenger trains are allowed 70 mile an hour. You're permitted 60. In lots of places, you have 30 mile an hour restrictions, 10 mile an hour restrictions.
There are go-slow orders on more than 5,000 miles of the system. $19,000 railroad cars are in desperate need of repair. Some say Conrail won't work, but not Conrail's chairman, Edward Jordan.
If you want to decide in advance it can fail, fine. But if you want to look at these problems and say, what can you do to solve them, then you can get moving on them. We think that there are many things we can improve.
The men who work on the railroads believe things will improve. They blame a lot of the problems on their old bosses.
Well, I think mismanagement was the bad part to begin with, but I think under the new Conrail, I think we'll have some good management, and I think that the men will be 100% behind them.
They'll get rid of a lot of vice presidents, which we have too many of right now.
But it'll take more than that to make a profit. Conrail is counting on renegotiating the expensive union agreements it's inheriting. For example, trainmen assigned to general yard work get an extra day's pay if they're switched to a work train that handles derailments. If they go back to general yard work later, they get another extra day's pay, or 3 days' pay in one 8-hour shift. The unions will fight proposals to change work rules like these. Conrail is also counting on raising the rates it charges for freight, and it insists that in spite of that, it will pick up more business. Some economists are skeptical. They say truckers have already cut deeply into railroad business in the Northeast, where distances between shipping points are shorter, and trucks may take away even more business if railroad rates go up. The chief executive of the bankrupt Lehigh Valley line, Robert Haldeman, predicts Conrail will always lose money.
I believe that Conrail will cost the taxpayers continuing money. I do not think that they are going to be profitable. This should go on maybe for 5 to 10 years, and then the public will begin to think in terms, well, rather than continuing to do this, perhaps we should take over and nationalize the railroads.
One ominous note, 5 years ago the government created Amtrak to rescue passenger service as Conrail is supposed to rescue freight. But instead of making a profit, Amtrak is losing hundreds of millions of dollars a year. So some see Conrail as a fresh chance to save the railroads. Others see it as another government boondoggle doomed to fail. At stake are billions of dollars of taxpayers' money. Robert Hager, NBC News in Morrisville, Pennsylvania.
So from midnight on, Conrail. Just Conrail, and goodbye to some famous names many of us grew up with. The Lehigh Valley, the Erie Lackawanna, the Central of New Jersey, the Ann Arbor, the Lehigh and Hudson, the Reading, the New York Central, and the mighty Pennsylvania. Conrail, that's just short for Consolidated Rail Corporation.
This is Roman meal, a unique blend of whole grain wheat and rye, coarsely ground to retain all of the bran in the wheat and the rye germ. Defatted flaxseed is added, along with an extra measure of bran. Roman meal is combined with other nutritious ingredients like enriched flour and pure golden honey. The result? Roman meal bread. The light brown bread with natural whole grain goodness. The Roman Meal Company thought you'd like to know.
The New Jersey Supreme Court ruled today in the Karen Ann Quinlan case, and the ruling was favorable to her mother and father, who want her to be allowed to die. Miss Quinlan has been in a coma for almost a year and is being kept alive by a machine. The New Jersey High Court appointed her father today as her legal guardian, and the court said he could allow her to die if competent medical authorities agree with his position that there's no reasonable chance of her recovery. Further, the court gave Mr. Quinlan the right to hire doctors who agree with his position that she has no chance of any kind of life. The Quinlans held a press conference after the ruling, and here is some of what they said.
And I cried.
Mr. Quinlan, how about you?
I was shocked, I'm afraid, overwhelmed, and even more so when we heard that the decision was unanimous.
Were you
surprised? I was expected, I guess. Surprised at the fact that the decision was unanimous.
What do you think the possible odds of getting a team of doctors who will agree with you that Karen will never recover? What are your prospects for getting a team like that?
I don't think we'll have any problem at all with that.
Do you not already have the team, Mr.
No, as far as the mechanics of implementing the decision itself, is we have not had the opportunity to discuss how to go about and achieving that particular end.
Is it possible that you would retain some of the medical staff that was involved with Karen before?
What we will do at this time is to open up avenues of communication with the hospital, with the physicians, in order to attempt to implement the decision rendered today by the...
Do you have any fears that the hospital might be adamant as to the decision?
None at all.
Mrs. Quinlan, did the decision surprise you? In a way, I didn't expect it to be a unanimous decision, and I think what I was happy about was that they appointed my husband as his daughter's guardian. I was very thankful to that.
We all appreciate.
We asked our legal correspondent, Carl Stern, to check on the legal position now. The state of New Jersey will take a couple of days to decide whether or not to appeal, and it could decide not to appeal. If the appeal of today's ruling is made, it will go to the U.S. Supreme Court. Good night for NBC News.